What's up, world of podcasts? My name is Shay Baby.
And I'm Charlie.
And welcome back to
We the Jury Podcast.
How nice of you to endure yet again another episode.
Mwahahaha. You've joined the dark side.
Join the dark side. So in our last episode, we left off with asking you guys two questions. The first one, which was Ted Bundy's last meal.
I had quite a couple people. Oh my gosh, the amount of responses that I got was awesome. So I actually had quite a few people really curious to know what his last meal is. Okay, so are you ready?
I'm ready. What was his last meal?
Ted Bundy, his last meal. Now, he refused to make a special request, so he was given the standard last meal on Florida's death row. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, I'm expecting most of you. I didn't know until I researched it. He had steak, done medium rare, eggs over easy, toast with butter and jelly, milk, coffee, juice, and hash browns.
Can I just say that that's like...
luxury.
That sounds like just like breakfast and dinner.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can have, steak with your eggs in the morning, so I get that. First of all, he should have had it medium. Medium rare is just too rare for me.
Another serial killer comes to mind, and I can't remember who it is, but his last meal consisted of 2 pounds of fresh strawberries.
Okay, I like strawberries. I
Yeah.
can see that.
Yeah.
I do blueberries too, and pineapple.
So there'll definitely be more interesting last meals that I'll be happy to give you. But it makes me kind of wonder, like, if he could have anything, why'd he just go with the basic?
I don't think it's basic. I just think it's weird that he, obviously had coffee, so I mean, I guess milk. But, I think it's weird, especially because of where I work. I'm a waitress right now, guys. And we serve steak. Why would you drink it with milk?
I don't think Homeboy got the kind of steak that you serve, because that's some high-end steak right there that you serve.
Because there wasn't a limit, right?
At the time, there was no limit on...
I'm sorry, that's brazy.
Yeah, on what your last meal could be.
He did not deserve the best steak that existed.
Now, your last meal has to be under $20.
Yeah, that's more realistic. I don't even think they should get a choice, but whatevs.
So, like KFC.
Not even KFC, bro. You get the scraps. I don't freaking know.
Great.
So the next question was, would you rather rot in a cell or serve the death penalty?
So, life in prison without parole.
Right. Not just you're going to do a couple of years. This is you have to spend the rest of your life in prison.
And there's no way out of that.
And there's
no appeals, no nothing.
No.
Versus the death penalty.
Yes.
Which could end it sooner.
Now, I would like to say to all of my fellow friends and family that did not reply to my question, please reply to that question. Leave it down in the comment section. Tell me in person, because I literally had to ask Ivy and then my boyfriend
Really?
what their responses was. Yeah, because I didn't get any responses about the rot in the cell or serve the death penalty.
I did actually log into our email, and I had the ones that were willing to
Oh, you did?
give an answer.
People actually sent stuff on the email?
Yes!
I didn't know that.
Yes!
Thank you, guys. I'm so sorry. I don't have access to our email right now.
I'm working on that. We're trying to exchange. So, Shay Baby over here is much more technologically inclined. She's up to date with all the, new social. So, she manages our Instagram account primarily right now.
Yeet.
Totally trust her with that. And I'm managing the personal email, which we gave you guys. So,
that's interesting. Okay. So, from the two that I had to beg and ask, first one was Drew. He said that he would rather rot in a cell.
Oof.
Because he doesn't believe in the death penalty.
Okay.
He thinks it lets people off too easy.
Okay.
And that it really doesn't cost taxpayers that much money to throw them in a hole and serve them like crappy stale bread. Which is for fact.
Okay.
But being me, though, towards that kind of opinion, I wouldn't want to have to stare at a wall for 50 plus years until I die. So I would much rather serve the death penalty if I was in that predicament. Now, Ivy, she said the same thing, the death penalty. Because if she got caught, she'd rather go out with a bang. She literally said that today on FaceTime.
I love it. I love Ivy. You guys, we're going to have Ivy on the show at some point. You guys will adore her.
Right. She kind of shares the same kind of dark humor that I have. So shout out to you, baby girl. Love you.
To be fair, I feel like if you're still with us and listening to our third episode, you too must be a little
dark inside.
A little dark inside. And
which I do want to apologize, because I do want to give all my respect to, the victims. you know?
Yeah, we don't want to sound insensitive by
Right.
any means.
So I do apologize if I ever come across that way, because I promise you I'm not. I do have respect for them. I look at things, that's my coping mechanism for
Yeah.
things. It's just
well,
to like
everybody
make a laugh
handles
out of
it
it.
differently. Everybody does. So we just definitely want you guys to know we do not want to sound insensitive. We by no means feel insensitive towards the victims. So there's that.
She also added too, because who's to say that she wouldn't get like harmed
Ivy.
in prison?
We're talking about Ivy.
Yeah. She said that who's to say she wouldn't get harmed by someone else in the prison. So she might die from someone in there.
Well, that could depend on what she's in prison for.
That's very true. Because she could just be in like straight confinement and not ever like be allowed to go out.
Well, if she was a man killer, I don't think many women would mess with her. If she was a baby killer now.
Oof. Killing is killing though. You kill someone, I feel like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but there is like a hierarchy in prison, and it's like a known thing. If you mess with kids, women and children are...
Right, when you come in, the people find that out, and they're like, oh, hell no.
Yes.
Like, this guy deserves to get beat up.
So what other feedback did you get?
She also, literally, because I asked them literally today, love you guys, once again, love the both of you. She also just added that, you know, if it was not in her ball, like if the ball wasn't in her court, she would definitely want like the killer to like die. So that's pretty much all I got.
That's good
from
feedback,
the
though.
people. Well, because I had to ask them.
I have a couple that came through the email. It was actually pretty tied up. So exactly half of my responders said that they would rather rot in a cell. The primary reason being that they are afraid to die. They, by any means, whether it be lethal injection, the electric chair.
I wouldn't want to be electrocuted.
And I don't think a lot of states do that anymore. I think lethal injection is much more practiced now.
I would go with that. I would not want to be electrocuted.
And I can understand that because my mom, actually, who will also be a guest at some point, you guys, and she knows more true crime than I could ever know.
We have to have both of our moms on at
Yes.
the same time. Because my mom, too. Like, I told her who I was covering today, and she, like, already knew. And I was like, no way.
No way.
Yeah. So
really?
we got to have both of them on for
My
sure.
mom asked me who it was, and I was like, I don't know, and I don't want to know because I'm like, so last episode, guys, you heard a lot of me trying to get through a lot of material, but this episode is coming from Shay Baby. She did all the research. I don't know the case she's presenting to me today, so I am here and ready to hear it for the first time.
All right. So you ready to hear who it is then?
Oh, real quick, before I digress. So, the half and half responses that I got in regards to rotting in the cell for the rest of your life versus the death penalty. And half of you guys said that you'd rather stay in jail. The other half, including myself, is I would prefer the death penalty. But there is a catch. Some people remain on death row for more than 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Right. So it's not like you'd get killed right away then.
Yeah, but it would still be less time than if you were there for the rest of your life. So I stand by my opinion, but I have mutual respect for...
I just hope I never have to make that decision for
Let's just
myself.
not.
I don't plan on it.
Let's
but
just not.
you never know. Shay Baby might have to make a hit
No,
and run.
listen, Charlie is here to tell you guys that I'm not going to let Shay Baby get in any trouble, okay?
Well, she's around.
No, she has way too much potential.
All right.
Okay,
You ready to hear him?
I'm ready.
Okay. So I'll give you a couple clues to let you maybe guess.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So, big warning before I begin. This is a children's case.
Okay.
So, those that are listening, if you have to tune out, we understand. Those of you that are sticking with us, just prepare yourself. Brace yourselves. Okay? Because
Be prepared.
this man is sick. This man's nasty. Like when I tell you sick.
Nasty.
Like it was so bad when I was researching him. You can even ask my boyfriend.
You had
'cause
to
he
take a
helped
break?
me. I literally had to go to the bathroom. My stomach felt sick.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll
And
tell
normally
you.
things don't affect me like that. So just take that into consideration.
I'm curious how I'll handle it because I generally compartmentalize really well in these situations. I also work, just side note real quick before we get in, I also work in a job where I frequently am present for the death of our patients. So I have to be able to compartmentalize.
You got to be numb to it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So one clue, he was known as one of the most vile serial killers. His timing was around the 1800s. Any clues? Anything coming to mind?
1800s. Okay,
Yes,
so
he
that's
was born
vintage.
May 19th, 1870.
I'm gonna say Ripper H.H. Holmes, maybe?
Nope.
Really?
Albert Fish.
Oh!
Yeah.
I do know a little bit about him. He was a freak,
Yeah,
man.
that's what I'm telling you. He's sick nasty.
Okay.
Also known as Hamilton Howard Fish.
Was that his, given name?
Hamilton Howard, yes, that was his given name. However, he changed it to Albert.
Okay.
His nicknames were the Werewolf of Wisteria, the Gray Man, Brooklyn Vampire, Moon Maniac, and my favorite, the Boogeyman.
Moon Maniac.
Just listen, and
Okay.
you'll understand.
Okay.
You'll understand exactly why he was called what he was called.
Okay.
So, this man had a lot of fetishes under his belt. The first 4 that are for a fact known, he was a cannibalist, which is a human that eats other humans.
Mm-hmm.
A pedophile, which is sexual feelings towards children.
Mm-hmm.
Coprophilia, which is the intense interest and pleasure in feces and defecation, sexual arousal.
Wait a second. So this is like those
Shit.
like during the intercourse involving shit.
Yes. Like, you could probably shit on him.
Okay.
He probably would have liked that.
Okay, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
be honest. That ranks right up there with necrophilia on Ted Bundy's
Nasty.
part. Nasty.
So he also, urophilia, which is the sexual interest in urine/urination, such as drinking your own pee or somebody else's pee, watching someone pee, or peeing on a partner during sex, and then obviously the partner peeing on you.
Hard pass.
Nasty. Piss. Last one, sadism. He was a sadist. He derived pleasure from inflicting pain, suffering, or humiliation on others sexually.
That I knew.
Yeah.
That I knew, and I don't want to say anything or ask any questions in depth because I feel like you're definitely going to cover it.
I'm going to cover it. I promise.
But I can already think of what it was that he did that was so masochistic.
So there was also a long possible list of phobias. A psychologist had to look over him when he first came in during his very last trial, and it's about 14 on the list. I'm going to redo that.
Okay,
go ahead.
So he had a psychological evaluation
Yes.
performed by a psychiatrist.
Yes, I could not speak for a moment, guys, so Charlie had to help me out there because I was... So anyways, the list goes on and on. It's really sickening, so we're going to take a little toast to that because brace ourselves.
Yeah, toast. Ugh. Okay.
Could you put my wine over there for me?
I sure can.
Thank you,
Let's
Ellen.
go.
So his method of madness was strangulation and stabbing. His victims were murdered between the years of 1924 to 1934, which were decades after he was born.
Wait, I thought you said the 1800s.
So he was born in 1870, in the year of 1870, but he did not start committing his crimes until 1924 to 1934. That's when he started to get bad. He was an old-ass man. He did not start doing this shit until he was, old as fuck.
Yeah, all the pictures I've seen of him in custody and whatnot he's very old.
Yeah. And his number of victims shows as 3+. Those were victims that he had murdered. Now, after his capture, he admitted to molesting over 400 children.
No.
Yeah.
What the worst of the worst of the worst.
That's why when I said he is the vilest.
Oh, those poor
Vile.
babies.
Poor
Okay,
babies.
all right, go on.
So his crime location was New York. The 3 known victims, their names are Francis X. McDonnell, an 8-year-old boy, Bill Gaffney, another 8-year-old boy, and last but not least, a little girl, 10 years old, Grace Budd.
Oh.
So our hearts go out to those and the rest.
The families of those victims.
For everyone. Now, to get a little picture in your head of what he could have looked like, he was a small, gentle-looking man. He gave off very kind vibes in which he would bring his victims in, capturing them by deceit. Now, a lot of the pictures show him with a bowler hat on, and he had an interesting little stash.
Ooh.
I felt like I should mention that.
That's also a little sus to me.
Yeah, he was very suspect.
Wait, so you're telling me that he was a cute, charming little old man, basically, and he lured people willingly into his home?
He'd create really good relationships with the families of the children, get them to trust him, and then do the deeds that he would do.
Talk about freaking,
manipulative.
I was going to say, I'm having a blank, but murder, premeditated. Talk about premeditation.
Right. Now, because you guys know that I find the backstory is always important. To every hero, you want to know what made them want to serve justice, and to every serial killer, there's always a reason behind the madness. Now, Mr. Fish was the youngest of 4 children. Oddly, I found this very odd, but his father, Randolph Fish, was 43 years older than his wife, Ellen Fish, Albert's mother. Very, very weird dynamic duo.
I've heard of it before, and it works in some cases, but for me personally, that's a bit extreme.
It was in the 1800s when they had like arranged marriages, or he could have been rich, or he could have just been.
You'd wed your daughter off at 16.
That, yeah, exactly. So Randall was 75 years old when Fish was born. He was old AF.
Oh.
And Ellen was 32. So it was a 32-year-old married to a 75-year-old.
So neither one of them had the energy to go out and play ball with it.
I mean, 32. That's not that old.
Okay, yeah, it's not that old.
So Albert came from a pretty insane family tree. His family was wacko. His family had a long history of mental illnesses. First off, his uncle was diagnosed with mania, which is extremely elevated and excitable moods, often associated with bipolar disorder. So he'd have a higher energy level than most. He thought he was invincible, maybe more talkative, and little to no sleep.
So that would be very high highs and very low lows.
Yes. If that were me and I had loss on my sleep, I'd be a monster too. Because, baby, I sleep at least 10 plus hours. So I know that man was losing his shit.
I've worked with a couple of individuals with bipolar, and I've known a couple personal friends who have it as well. And it is a very extreme struggle.
All right. His brother was sent to a state mental institution, which I'm not 100%. I sifted through some of my research, and it was noted that he lived there for quite a while at the mental institute. However, I'm not 100%. His sister was also diagnosed with a mental affliction. His mother experienced visual hallucinations. Maybe she was like a schizo.
Quite possibly. Quite possibly.
And then, last but not least, 3 of the other relatives were also diagnosed with mental illnesses. So he came from a pretty
mental illness diagnosis at that time. We've come a long way in being able to more specifically identify the symptoms and rename some of those particular mental illnesses. But yeah, that's a lot in one family.
Very unfortunate that they all had to go through those mental illnesses, but you can kind of just see the connection there. It kind of just makes sense, you know? It was sad, but Randall died in 1975 when Fish was 5 years old.
Well, he was 75 when he was born.
Right. He was already pretty old and probably like already kind of on his deathbed when Albert was born, unfortunately. That forced Fish into the St. John's Orphanage in Washington. His mother was in no way, shape, or form able to take care of 4 children on her own. She did not have the monies to support herself.
She also had, didn't you say his mother was having hallucinations?
Yes.
Yeah.
So she would, like, no way, shape, or form, like, capable of doing that. Now, in the orphanage, he suffered abuse. After suffering from so much abuse, he started to enjoy the pain, hence why he's a sadist.
What a strange I don't want to say strange and be offensive to anybody else who has masochistic tendencies, but it's something that I just can't quite wrap my mind around.
In a way, I can see why
as
someone would be
mechanism?
a sadist. Yeah, not as a coping mechanism. Strictly just sexual and not too deep into
But he
painful
started
pleasure.
Well, he started to enjoy pleasure from the abuse, you said.
Right. Which is just, I think because he expected it every day. I have here in my notes that in the orphanage he was exposed to regular beatings and sadistic practices or sadistic acts of brutality. So imagine just knowing it's going to come every single day. What better? The brain, it's just something that the brain does in order to just help at the time being, because he was in this orphanage for quite a while. So he had no choice but to get used to it.
Unfortunately, too, this is so common throughout history in orphanages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And that's so very sad. The treatment that one gets when being an orphan, it's not fair.
And it will affect them for the rest of their life.
Right, like your parents already don't want you.
Yeah, even if you choose not to be a victim and you're able to get past that major hill, you still carry some symptoms.
Right. It
Yeah.
affected him for forever. So when he was asked about his experiences at the orphanage, I got an actual quote from him. He said, "I was there till I was nearly 9, and that's where I got started wrong. We were unmercifully whipped. I saw boys doing many things they should not have done." That's very, very sad. He was self-aware about his situation for sure.
Yeah, and you can just, without so many words, kind of understand what's going on.
Through his brain, yeah. So eventually, Ellen would regain custody of Albert in 1880, another 5 whole years later, when she was able to be back on her feet with her government job. Also, another thing that I did notice, I read somewhere too, claims that he was the only one that went to the orphanage because his brother was in a mental institution, meaning she only had to actually take care of 2 children, which it probably wasn't as heavy on her wallet for her. But I don't know how true that is either. So just imagine being the one that's picked to go to the orphanage too. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, and I wonder too who was paying or how the payment process worked for her other son being institutionalized.
Yeah, how could she afford that?
You know what? Being a single mom is hard, period.
Right.
Okay?
And she also was suffering mental health issues as well too at the same time. So
Ugh.
I don't even know how she accomplished that because I personally don't think I could take
But
care
at
of a
least
kid and I have nothing wrong with
back
me.
for her baby.
Right.
I mean,
she
that
did
mean-
eventually go back for
That
him.
means something to me.
Now, after being back in his mother's care at the age of 12, Fish would begin a relationship, or I put here, pursue a relationship with another boy via telegraph. Now, this new boy of interest would introduce him to the pleasure of drinking urine and eating feces.
So it didn't initially start as just something that came up in his mind. It was someone else that encouraged him in that direction. Okay.
So everything that we're seeing that's happening to him right now, a part of his like fetishes, is merely just by influence and experience. When you're 12 and you're like very curious, because at some point, because personally, I don't remember the time when everything just made sense. You know what I'm saying? So when you're like 1, 2, 3, 4, you like really don't know what's going on. You don't know what's happening. But then there comes that age where you're like, oh, boys are cute. Oh, I smell weird. Like, you know what I'm saying? Where your mind is just like, and everything just makes sense.
Prepubescent.
Like mental thoughts. Yeah, I guess. So being 12, he's like, oh, is this how this is normally supposed to go? Like,
yeah, he's making unorthodox associations.
Yeah. So Albert would begin to also grow even more curious now, and he would visit public bathhouses to observe other boys undress. And he would spend a lot of his time there.
Okay.
Any free time he had, he was at the bathhouses.
Okay.
Now,
he could have just taken up, like, I don't know, sewing or something.
Well, he's talking to the boy over the telegraph now.
Or gardening.
Right. Gardening. Yeah, he could. Well, would you, when you're like a teenager, would you want to garden?
Nah.
I mean, to me, gardening sounds cool as shit now, because I'm like an
But in
adult.
high school, nah.
Probably not. No, they'd probably just go to a party or something.
I was drinking like a 12-pack of Mountain Dew in high school. It was the most unhealthy
I'm
thing
so
I'd
dead.
ever
Shout out to my mom. She drinks some Mountain Dews. That's the only reason why I like Mountain Dews, because my mom. Now, as far as education wise goes, obviously he was in the orphan system, and mom was a little messed up, wacky, crazy, so he didn't really get no formal education. He was taught more to work with his hands than use his brain. So he kind of was not on the high GPA, or the IQ was like probably very, very low.
Okay.
Now, as he was approaching adulthood, okay, he created another hobby for himself. He would become bolder and start to write obscene letters to women he found advertising in matrimonial and classified columns in papers and magazines. His fondness for shocking these women with written words would take an even darker turn when his behavior enters the realm of depravity.
Wait, so explain that to me. So he was just writing nasty letters and sending it to women who were about to be married?
That, yes, or if, like, say a woman was, like, looking for a job, or, like, you know, the little columns on the newspaper where you get involved and, like, the writer will write back to you.
Right.
He'd pick those ladies and he'd write to them, and he would write nasty to them. He just got off on the pure fact how shocked they would be.
Strange.
This is where we stop here as far as his background, because it was back in the 1800s, so I don't really have a whole bunch of documentation of what his like early life was like as far as behaviors. All we know is that he comes from a long line of mental illness in his family.
I think you provided a good amount.
We see where he gets his sadism and his other little weird interest. Those were all just influences when he was younger.
Yeah, can you even call that a hobby?
Did I say hobby?
No, well,
I
no.
mean, he became so consumed with his fantasies that it became like his like life's job, like his life's work.
his passion.
Yes. So he became a painter. He was a painter.
What?
And he'd do little side jobs. That's kind of how he got by.
So he was like a decent artist too?
He was a little house painter.
Oh.
No, he just paint houses. Yeah. He wasn't like no Picasso or anything like that.
Heard.
But that's how he would make his money to just barely survive. Now we're just going to jump into his straight 20s when he starts showing some signs. He starts doing a little bit more of some weird things.
Even more weird?
Even more weird things. Oh, yes. It gets like from those are just pre-warnings, baby. That was just like, that was literally just the beginning, I promise you. Like, it gets.
You haven't even iced the cake yet.
I had like, no. Baby, we just put literally like the base down for the cake.
Oh, boy.
Like, I mean, if you want to take another little sippy of the wine, you want to do so? Let's do it.
All right,
Quick.
let's do
Yep,
it.
Just bring it in. Okay? And listeners at home, if you have a blunt or a drink beside you by any chance.
Hey, shout out to a podcast, This Is Why We Drink.
Mm-hmm.
Great podcast. You should take a listen.
We're for sure not sober for this one. I will tell you that.
I'm not quite tipsy. Well, okay, maybe a little.
I mean, we're not fucked, but... Okay. So, he was an actual suspect in 5 murder cases and officially confessed to 3 murders. Remember the 3+ murders I mentioned in the beginning. And the cops were also able to link him to 2 stabbings as well. At one point, he proclaimed this. He said, "I have children in every state," claiming that he had over 100 victims, but were unsure at the time if it was referencing rapes, cannibalism, or if it was even true at all.
What a douche.
Do you want to know kind of what he meant by that? He was meaning that he had just ran through and had molested so many girls that he possibly had children all over the place. That's what he meant by that. Sick. Sicko.
You know what I really want to do? I want to get, where is this? I think this is from Step Brothers. I want to get a pillowcase. I'm going to fill it with hard bar soap, and I just want to beat him with it.
Hey, he's already dead,
know
baby.
what? He'd enjoy it. Forget that.
Yeah. He would
Forget
enjoy
it.
that. Yeah, no. How could you, like, punish this man? There probably was no possible way to punish him for the things that he did. When he was 18, he was arranged a marriage by his mother to Anna Mary Hoffman. She was 9 years younger than him, making her 9 years old when she married Albert. So he was 18 years old, married to a 9-year-old girl.
People.
Anna Mary Hoffman.
Why?
Yeah. But that was all arranged. That was all arranged by Ellen, his mother. So what can you do about an arranged marriage? Can't. Now, at age 20, he moved to New York and started to engage in male prostitution. And that was the start of his molestation and raping of young boys, mostly under 6. Now, in the beginning, this is still a very big crime. I did say that he didn't start doing things until he got older, but what I meant by that was that he didn't start, like, actually murdering and doing his cannibalism. So just at 20, he was just molesting.
Ugh.
Which is still awful. So in 1903, he was first arrested for grand larceny, which has nothing to do with any of the crimes he would commit later, but he was then released. Totally unrelated, but he did get into a little bit of trouble that didn't have anything to do with the molestation at the time. Now, his first time, supposedly, he was interested in human mutilation. He said that he went on a date, probably an underage boy, to a wax museum and saw a bisection of a penis.
Like, as an exhibit?
Yeah, that's what sparked his interest in mutilation, because he's seen just like the penis.
Dissected.
Yeah.
And on display.
Even though it was like a statue, probably. So he's like, that's interesting.
Did you know, and honestly, you listeners, if you know, I would really like to know, but there is actually a whole museum somewhere dedicated to penises. They have penises.
Is there really?
Yeah, the largest penis they have is, I think, from like a whale, a blue whale, or sperm whale, and it's like massive. And then the smallest they have, I think, is from a mouse or something, It's a whole museum. And
Wait, so is it like just like little sculptures and like pictures and paintings, or is
No,
it
no,
like
no.
their actual penises?
It's the actual penises.
Oh wow.
And
Where's
they're-
this at?
That's what I'm saying. If you guys know, please do let us know.
We might have to go take a trip.
We the Jury Podcast 2023 at gmail.com.
Yep, putting it out there. Penis museum.
We need to know.
Now, his possible first mutilation victim was around 1910 to Thomas Keaton, an intellectually challenged 19-year-old. Another little pre-warning disclaimer, he did take advantage of disabled people and also African Americans at the time, because it was, during that time where racism was valid, and then obviously if, you did have a little something like wrong with you, nobody would have noticed that they were gone.
Ugh.
Like what you just said. Cowardly.
Very cowardly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Very low.
yeah, I feel like most predators prey on the innocent or what they would consider easier, weaker prey.
So
Minorities at the time.
So, Thomas Keaton, shortly after starting the relationship with him, Fish took him to an old farmhouse, tortured him for 2 weeks before culminating in him cutting off half of his penis, describing his immense pleasure watching him in pain to the police. He was going to kill and eat him, but feared the meat would go bad in the summer heat, so he bandaged him up quickly and left him a $10 bill before leaving on a train and never coming back. Like, kissed him on the forehead, left the dollar bill.
There's something so insulting about, and there's a couple cases, and again, the specifics don't come to mind, but there's a couple cases where their victims are thrown money at before released, and that is just grotesquely appalling to me to the utmost degree.
He literally almost like beat him to death. What's $10 to... I don't get it.
It's the arrogance.
They're like, oh, thanks. Thanks for letting me beat the shit out of you.
This is what you were worth to me.
Right.
Go on. It's
basically, I mean, like, all I can do. Here you go. Now, eventually, his wife left him for their neighbor, John Strobe, in 1917, leaving Fish alone with the children. Now, could it have just been an affair with a neighbor? Or did she sense that he was a weirdo and she was like, I got a GTFO?
Could have been both, but she did neglect her kids.
Yeah, she left all 6 children that they had together.
So
with
she
him.
had suspicions about her husband, then why would she leave her kids? So, but she was... No, wait.
She had to have already been messed up to be with someone like him. He was already a
Hey.
little weird. So...
Wait, but wasn't it an arranged marriage?
Yep. So she basically had no choice in the beginning. That's right. How am I forgetting that? I'm the one that's telling it. That's true. She left him for the neighbor. Okay. And around this time is when Fish began claiming he was hallucinating. So he was having hallucinations just like his mom. One time, he wrapped himself up in a carpet and told the newspaper he was following instructions from John the Apostle. It was unclear if he was making it up or if he was being genuine, experimenting in self-mutilation, such as having at least 29 needles inserted into his groin and abdomen.
Yes, that is the thing I knew.
They found that out through
An X-ray, right?
an X-ray after his arrest.
He just enjoyed sticking pins and needles into his skin, and some of them actually reached bone.
Right. They had to pull some needles out of his butt as well too
No.
before they executed him. Yeah. That's the only reason how they knew. So, he also would pad himself with a nail-studded paddle. He'd also soak a rag in lighter fluid and put it into his anus and light it.
Oh.
Talk about a weird thing.
I feel like the... Oh.
That's to himself, though. He did this to himself willingly.
Oh.
Girl, he did this to himself willingly. Now, no claims say anything about him harming his own children were directly ever found, but I'm sure they were emotionally traumatized just by having him as their father. They lived a pretty normal life, though, up until, like, the divorce, until it probably flipped a switch and he started going crazier. But it is mentioned that they recalled Fish occasionally asking them to participate in his sadomasochist games. In one such game, he asked the children to paddle him with that nail-filled paddle until blood ran down his legs.
That's a whole nother level of abuse.
I mean, he had to go through it in the orphanage, so... I'm not saying that he should have done that to his children,
No,
but
it's like
he was introduced to it,
if
so
you-
now he's introducing his
you
children
can
to
look
it.
at his background and see like the criteria.
Are you okay, baby girl?
Yes.
Guys, she's like holding her face right now. I'm telling you.
This is one of those cases that is just like, okay, I took several classes in college on abnormal psychology, and even this is like intense to me.
For sure. So it was also claimed that he would pay young boys to bring him other young children for him to torture. So he'd use other kids to lure other
Gacy
kids.
did that too.
Yep. Now, most likely lying to them and hoping that by using the kids, he wouldn't be a suspect. So it was another kid that grabbed the other kid so it wouldn't target him. Does that make sense?
Why does he sound more intelligent than he ought to be?
Right. Because remember, he doesn't have brains, but he's putting things pretty together. But he also doesn't want to get
Not
caught.
necessarily you said that he doesn't have brains. It's just he didn't have a formal education.
Right.
That doesn't mean that he couldn't have naturally been, manipulative, very comprehensive, very...
He picked up on it pretty quickly, too.
Yeah.
So his tools that he used, he had a special name for his tools. The implements of hell.
Oh,
The implements of hell. Now, these tools were a butcher knife, a meat cleaver, and a handsaw. Now we're going to get to the escalation. Escalator. Now, in 1919, he stabbed another mentally disabled person in Washington, D.C. In 1924, he tried to lure 8-year-old Beatrice Keel from her front yard, claiming to need help finding rhubarb, but was chased away by her mother. He tried to sleep in their barn that same night, but was chased away by her father. So he was fixated on Beatrice.
Mm-hmm.
Now, 3 days later, he murdered Francis McDonald, a 9-year-old that we mentioned before from around the same area. This was on July 14th, 1924. He was playing catch with his friends and never returned. Fish sexually assaulted him and eventually strangled the boy with his suspenders and left him hanging in a tree. That's, yeah.
Can you imagine when the officers and the family that had to
Clean
okay.
up, yeah. His legs and abdomen were horribly lacerated, and his left leg was almost bare of flesh. Fish claims it wasn't him that did it, so possibly animals did more damage to the body. The boy's friends and neighbors' reports of what he looked like gave him the name the Gray Man because he was so disheveled and old-looking at the time. Fish originally denied this claim, but confessed to it after his final trial. So
you probably had some at least salt and pepper, gray hair.
yeah, and just remember that the bowler hat and the mustache that I mentioned too.
Yep.
Kind of what he looked like. Now, his next victim, Bill Gaffney, on February 11th, 1927. 4 children were playing in the hallway. Fish took 4-year-old Billy Gaffney, and when the other children were questioned what happened, one said, "The boogeyman took him," which is where he got that name. Now, initially, serial killer Peter, and I'm going to mess this up so bad, Kudzinowski, was a suspect in Gaffney's murder, but someone matched the description of Fish to a man struggling to hold a crying child on a trolley. So they found out that it wasn't actually that serial killer, it was Albert. In a letter to his attorney, Fish went into vivid and graphic detail about what he did to the boy during and also almost a list of recipes on how he cooked the meat.
Wow.
And I did read into that letter. Awful. Some of the things that he says, this is where I had to stop and go to the bathroom.
I appreciate you not including all those details, but for you folks who are curious, you can find it online, right?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
If you look up the Bill Gaffney letter from Albert Fish. The boy's mother went to question him while he was arrested to ask about her son, but Fish would not talk to her, and Fish actually started weeping. So the mom actually didn't even believe that Fish was her son's murderer, but he most definitely was. And when they found the letter later, that further confirmed it.
I absolutely believe this man is insane.
He is insane. Definitely insane. To be able to stomach doing any of those things.
I know you're going to tell us, but I am very curious if he actually got off on insanity. Second-degree murder on the basis of insanity.
Our last victim that we know for sure about is Grace Budd. On May 25th, 1928. Fish saw an ad from a young man, Edward Budd, looking for work. He promised, under the name Frank Howard, to hire him and his friend. but never did, obviously, but did send a telegram apologizing and promising to get back with him. When he did show up, he met the young man's parents, and he even met the sister, Grace Budd, forming a really good relationship with the parents that eventually he became much more interested in Grace Budd than he did the strong 18-year-old Edward. Fish was able to convince the family that he had to go to his niece's birthday party, and the parents allowed Grace to accompany him to the party. It was definitely a different time back then where you were more trustworthy. Now, Fish took her to Wisteria College. That's where he gets the, I think it was Wisteria Vampire.
I would never. I'm sorry. The list of people that I'm even willing to allow to babysit my child
Right.
could fit on a sticky note. Maybe.
So the Werewolf of Wisteria. So that's where he got that nickname from. The Werewolf of Wisteria. Because Fish took her to Wisteria College at 359 Mountain Road, which was a place he had previously planned to take someone else to. It was a nice large house, which in modern times is now listed for $1 million in an affluent neighborhood just up the road from NYC.
Oh.
He then strangled her and ate her over the course of 9 days. Yeah.
That poor girl and that poor family.
Right.
Oh my gosh, my heart goes out. Our hearts go out.
For sure. Oh, my heart does as well, too. That's awful.
Okay.
Now, when we get into his arrest and trial, Fish gave himself away, actually, by sending a letter to Grace Budd's mother in 1934, which was 6 years after her disappearance/murder. This letter detailed the little girl's death and how he cannibalized her body in detail. And at the end, I would also like to read that letter, if you can handle it. We're not going to include Bill Gaffney, but we will include Grace Budd's letter. Now, on the envelope that he used to send the letter, read the words NYPCBA, which stood for the New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. After doing some investigating, they came across a company janitor that had taken some of those stationery envelopes home with him. He left them behind when he moved out of a rooming house. Further inquiries revealed that Fish himself had checked out of that same room just a few days before the letter was sent. And that's how they found the ties that Albert Fish sent that letter.
That's just another way of inflicting pain, so much pain, upon the mother of the girl to send a detailed
Right.
letter containing the details of her murder.
A lot of times I feel like we have a little bit less compassion for those that have like lived their lives, but like there's compassion all around. But it's sad though that most of these children were 8, 10. They weren't even a teenager yet.
It's just so brutal.
They didn't get
there was
to
no
experience
quick death whatsoever.
Right. They didn't get to
Okay.
experience life or anything, you know? So it really sucks. Now, according to the landlady, Fish was expecting a check from one of his sons and had asked her to hold it for him. That's a good landlord, holding the thing for a tenant. You know, if you get rid of somebody's mail or attempt with somebody's mail, you can get in really big trouble for that. So she basically was doing what she had to do. So she held on to that check, and investigators used this as their advantage and waited for Fish's return. He was then asked to come down to the station for questioning, in which he at first agreed. And then he turns around, pulls out a razor blade on the investigator, in which he was then immediately taken into custody.
Oh.
You're assaulting a police officer. So that's what happens. Now, once at the station, Fish had no denial in his partake of the murder of Grace Budd. He even mentioned he had intentions of killing her brother, Edward, first. His trial was set to begin on March 11th, 1935 in New York.
New York.
Fish pleaded insanity, claiming God had told him to kill these children.
I don't know if he believed God told him, but I do believe he's insane.
Well, if he was hallucinating,
It could be anything.
his mother showed signs of being a schizophrenic, it could have been just voices in his head. In a situation like this, back in the Bible days, they would kill a lamb to forgive them of their sins.
Okay. So
He also was a very religious person, too.
So that's very Old Testament, obviously, and the correlation he made. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Now, after being examined by several psychiatrists, they testified that Fish had many sexual fetishes. This is the long list that I was mentioning in the beginning. Let us go through the list of fetishes. So first, sadism, which we already went over. The second, exhibitionism, which is the compulsion to display someone's genitals / behave sexually in public. Masochism, which is deriving pleasure from one's own pain or humiliation on self. Cunnilingus. Sounds funny. It is the stimulation of female genitals by tongue or lips. So basically eating the box.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of normal. That's normal.
Yeah.
Stimulation of female genitals by tongue or lips, eating the box. Like, you like...
Yeah,
I don't even gotta say that. You know you like the box being ate.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, anyways, I'm sorry. Now, analingus, which is a stimulation of the anus by tongue or mouth, eating booty. Flagellation.
Are you about to say flatulence?
No, flagellation.
Oh, I thought you were about to say flatulence. Like,
No.
oh, he just likes to pass gas on him.
No. No, flagellation, which is flogging or beating as a religious discipline.
Flogging?
So, flogging, yeah. Flogging.
Okay.
So basically, like the priest, if he got a bad thought or a sexual thought, he would like harm himself to stop thinking about the bad thought.
Or it possibly is like making amend or repenting for his sin.
Right. That was just how he punished himself.
That's a very old school Catholic belief too.
Yeah. Voyeurism, which is the practice of gaining sexual pleasure from watching others when they are naked / engaged in sexual activity. Food for thought. So, are a lot of people voyeurism because they like watching porn? That's other people having sex?
Yeah, but think about the time that this was. They couldn't just hop on the computer and be like,
Yeah.
you know,
You said,
eating the box.
eating the,
You
eating
know
the
what I
booty,
mean?
eating the box of the
Nah,
booty.
it wasn't quite like that.
Fellatio, which is anal sex acting. Ooh. Fellatio, which is oral sex act involving the penis. Giving head.
Mm-hmm.
Giving head in the bed. And then he
Oh
was
my
dead.
gosh.
No, I'm sorry. Cannibalism, which we mentioned already. Pedophilia, which we also mentioned. Picarism, which is the sexual interest in penetrating the skin of another person with sharp objects.
Another person or yourself too? Because remember, he poked himself a bunch also.
I think that has more to do with the masochism.
Okay.
Because that's inflicting self-pain.
Right.
This is just, I think, targeting
Inflicting
just the
it
skin.
upon others.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then coprophilia, which we also mentioned. And that's the shit.
Ugh.
The shit fetish.
Okay.
Infibulation. Prepare yourself for this one. This one, out of all of them, I know all of them are all messed up, but this one, to me, just really like, ooh, really, dude? Infibulation is the practice of exercising the clitoris and labia of a female and stitching together the edges of the vulva to prevent sexual intercourse. He would sew their vagina.
Oh.
My boyfriend kind of put it to me as basically it's like circumcising the vagina.
Yeah.
That's nasty. That's fucked up.
Why would you first stimulate it and then sew it shut? It's like property of you now. It's like a chastity belt and stitch it. Oh.
Yeah, it's like a built-in homemade chastity belt. And then
Woof.
yeah.
Okay.
Woof. Sorry. And then the last one, which is urophilia, which had to do with the fetish of the urine. So, R. Kelly. Listen. Ew, what do you mean R. Kelly?
R. Kelly peed on people.
Did he really?
Yeah.
So he made good music, but he was fucking awful.
Golden shower.
Ew, baby.
Yes.
Ew. I'm just gonna let you know right now.
No.
I'm not judging anybody for the things that you like to do, but
No thanks.
no thanks. When one of the psychiatrists were questioned on fish knowing right from wrong, he said that man was insane. So, you were right. He was definitely insane. Now,
So he couldn't differentiate between right and wrong or reality versus non-reality.
Right.
Yeah.
Although he knew he was wrong, his thoughts were outrun by his opinions of religion, sin, and atonement. Another thing with killing the children, he was just atoning for his sins. Although members of the jury...
Sacrificing the innocent.
Say it again.
Sacrificing the innocent.
For his non-innocent, guilty-ass self. Wrong. Now, although the members of the jury knew for a fact he was insane, they felt he should be executed anyways. So, they declared him sane and guilty of murder. Therefore, he was convicted and sentenced to death.
That's interesting. I didn't know that you could be sentenced to death on grounds of insanity.
That's why they marked him sane.
Just because of how horribly grotesque it
Right.
all was.
Just because of how awful it was, they said, even though we know you're really messed up, they were like, we're going to say that you are completely sane because they wanted to kill him. I mean, he was very deserving of it. No offense.
What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Moving on to the execution. Okay. On January 16th, 1936, Fish was strapped in an electric chair at the Sing Sing prison. His execution began approximately at 11:06 p.m., deep into the night.
Sing Sing prison, is that New York? I think it is.
Mm-hmm. He was pronounced dead 3 minutes later at 11:09 p.m. Right? They had to do it just right before midnight, but still that it fell within the day.
So it took 3 minutes.
Right. Took 3 minutes, and he was gone. Now, like the other prisoners, he was buried at the prison cemetery at Sing Sing, and it was reported that Fish even assisted the executioner by putting on the electrodes on his body.
Wow.
So he even helped the guy kill him. So it's a little bit different from Ted, how Ted just, like, did not want to die and was trying to, like,
He was terrified.
hold him off. This man was like, oh, I'll help you. No problem. You want me dead? I'll help. His last words were, I don't even know why I'm here.
Wow.
So do you think that that was maybe because, oh, I didn't do anything wrong. I don't know why I'm here. Or I don't know why I was ever born or existed.
I'm more likely to believe the latter. Because I'm more likely to believe the latter.
He basically thought that he was forgiving himself with the atonement of the children. So maybe he genuinely was like, I've been forgiven of my sins. Why am I here?
Did he ever consider, like, just going to confession?
Yeah, that was funny. I like that. That was funny. You said, did he ever consider just going to confession? No.
Or gardening?
Right. Or
I
gardening.
Can't get over that.
Or gardening. So, after his execution, shout out to James Dempsey, because you had to defend a horrible person. James Dempsey told a waiting press he had his final statement. His final last little bit of words that he can get out. Not the words before he died, but just a letter that he wrote of how he felt about everything going on. However, James Dempsey claimed he would never show anyone because it was the most filthy string of obscenities that he had ever read.
Wow.
Okay, so we have a couple of little last quotes that we got from the man himself. One of them was, what a thrill that will be if I have to die in the electric chair. It will be the supreme thrill, the only one I haven't tried. Sick fucker. So just like you said, I would have whacked him with a bag of rocks. Nope, he would have enjoyed it.
Bag of soap.
Bag of soap. Yeah, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I'm thinking rocks. I'm thinking like rocks in a sock. That man just saw it as another sexual fantasy. He got to live out
That's
the highest of highs,
insane.
thrills of thrills. He also said, I like children. They are tasty.
Ooh.
And the last one, I have no particular desire to live. I have no particular desire to be killed. It is a matter of indifference to me. I do not think I am altogether right.
Well, good.
Because you weren't.
Well, good, because, good thing you didn't really care. Because It was happening. You were going to die.
The purpose of stories like this is purely, I feel like, educational.
Yep,
Not
and to
only
raise
does
awareness.
Right. So we just like to, once again, say, look out for people. Pay attention to things. Pay attention to the red flags, the warning signs. Because stuff like this that we mentioned is probably happening as we speak right now. It's rough to say that, but it's the real honest truth. And we're here to bring it to you. Also, make sure that you're following us on our Instagram, WeThe.JuryPodcast. Please, our little 27 followers, thank you, Bookies, but also please.
We are also on Spotify, We the Jury Podcast. You can find us. We are also on YouTube, We the Jury Podcast. Please subscribe, like, and share.
Tell your mama, your mammy,
Your grandpappy,
your grandpappy,
your second cousin,
your sister, your third cousin, even a fourth cousin if you got one. Please help us grow our garden.
Yep. Manifest.
Do you get the reference? Help us grow our garden, because we garden, we don't kill.
We garden.
I think that this has been a sad podcast, but also a very informative podcast. Thank you so very much for tuning in. My name is Shay Baby.
And this is Charlie.
And we'll see you again here at
We the Jury Podcast.